3. No money, mo problems. Learning to live with it and without it. When I look back at my journal entries, there are several themes that stand out. Food, oof. Boys, duh. And money. Money was especially important to me as I was growing up, because sometimes we had it, but most of the time, because we didn't. April 8th, 2004. Things to do, or buy. 1. Get ears pierced, sterling silver. 2. Pay taxes, $88. 3. Pay Michael back. 4. Get clear belly ring while doing number 1 on list. 5. Get new jeans. 6. Look for plus get guy who fits list. 7. Get new eye sleeper mask. 8. Take back shorts to V Secret. 9. Get new bra from Pink Collection. 10. Think about something other than material things. 11. Get new modeling agency. 12. Get a job, modeling/acting, first job in 04. 13. Do something nice for Mom's Day. 14. Get real diamond belly ring. 15. Big one, get Chanel pink C earrings. 16. Figure out God stuff. 17. Get new car, nice one. 18. Take SATs, get good score. 19. Get into good college. 20. Finally get a record deal. 21. Get PR person to promote me as hot, sexy, rich party hopper. 22. Get Tarina Tarantino chandelier kitty earrings. 23. Take back miniskirt. 24. Get $71 back from Dad. 25. Finish reading Mind book. 26. Get some more money. 27. File unemployment claim. 28. Continue to be spontaneous and everything will work out. 29. Get some type of shimmer bronze powder for face for sexy summer look. I once asked my mom why she fell in love with my dad, and her answer was simple. He was fun. Shortly after they met, she moved out to California to live with him, and I'm sure they were your picture-perfect California couple. She was an aspiring model, and he a surfer boy with long hair and a yellow Jeep. Dad taught Mom how to drive in that yellow Jeep and wasn't even that mad when she later smashed it into a wall. When my mom found out she was pregnant with me, it definitely wasn't something they had planned on, but they went with it anyway. For most of my childhood, my parents were winging it. We have video of my first birthday party, which was just me, my mom, and my dad, wearing 80s nerd glasses, eating cake and opening presents in our tiny Glendale apartment. Later, my dad drove a silver Nissan Z, which at the time looked like it was straight out of Back to the Future. It was just a 2-seater, so when the 3 of us were in the car, I'd sit cross-legged in the back, sans seatbelt or even seat, hold on to the crossbar for safety, and duck every time we passed a cop, or even anyone who looked like they might call the cops. When I was 4, my brother came along, and 4 years after that, my little sister. My parents were no longer 2 young people madly in love, celebrating their baby's birthday. They had a full-fledged family. Shit had gotten real, and was about to get even realer when my dad lost his job. We've always jokingly called my dad a jack of all trades. He's a natural-born schmoozer who can fix anything, learn anything, do anything. He worked for Disney, he worked for Universal Music Publishing, he worked in IT, he even drove a truck for a sushi company for a while. My brother and I were not mad at that job, as the California rolls he would bring home were delicious. Some of those jobs paid more than others, and when Dad had money, he spent it. I don't fault him for this. It was my philosophy, too. If you're not having any fun now and saving everything for tomorrow, well, hello, you could die tomorrow. But Dad took it to the extreme. We had boats and 2 jet skis. He had a motorcycle, which I refused to ride because the vibrations from the exhaust made my legs itch. And we vacationed on Lake Mead every year. With 3 young children, my mom didn't work, so when Dad's money would start to dry up or a job didn't work out, we'd be back to sharing bedrooms in cramped, shitty apartments and clipping coupons to make ends meet. When he got offered a job doing IT for a tech company, we thought we'd made it. He was making a really nice salary, and they were flying him back and forth in business class to the company headquarters in Arizona. My parents bought a Lexus to celebrate, and we moved into a big house in Canyon Country. The house was a middle-class dream, 2 stories on a lot of land and located in a brand-new suburban subdivision where all the houses looked the same. It was like something out of a movie. When we went to look at it, I thought it was a mansion. My brother, sister, and I followed Dad from room to room asking, "Please, can we have this house? We love this house," with Mom secretly encouraging us in a whisper, "Tell your dad you want the house." "We want the house!" we screamed in unison from the gigantic backyard. Before we left, Dad put in an offer, and we bought the house. I had my own room, and I got to have a 13th birthday party with a dance floor under a tent in the backyard. The living room had big sliding glass doors that opened out into the backyard, and my dad opened those and hooked a karaoke machine up to the TV so people could go in and sing whenever they wanted. My mom made chili dogs and ice cream sundaes and set up a corner full of beanbag chairs as the ultimate hang zone. I even got to slow dance with my crush. It was movie magical and the best birthday ever. Still, though, it was pretty obvious that something wasn't right under the surface. My parents always seemed to be fighting about money, the screaming matches usually brought on by something new my dad had just bought, or by the fact that he'd taken out a double mortgage on the house. They spent very little time with each other, and whenever they were both in the house, the tension was as thick as Jell-O. Then, when I was 14, Dad lost the job in Arizona. At first, it seemed like no big deal. Dad could do anything, right? Certainly, he'd have a new job in no time. As it turned out, that wasn't the case. It was 2001, and I think the technical term for the economy at that time was in the shitter. September 11th happened, and the first internet bubble burst, so jobs, especially ones that could support a wife and 3 kids, were hard to find. We watched as our dad, who seemed like he could talk his way out of a paper bag and who knew enough to be president, couldn't find a job for another 3 years. I had overheard enough fighting to know that the double mortgage was a bad idea, but when my parents came home and told us they'd turned in the Lexus for a Mazda, it was confirmation that we were indeed fucked. Soon after that, we said goodbye to the dream house and moved into a shitty 3-bedroom apartment that was literally on the wrong side of the tracks. At night, while I was sleeping, I could hear trains rumble by and rattle the pictures on the walls. The other people in the apartment complex were total riffraff, so we couldn't play outside much because Mom was afraid we'd get kidnapped, or worse, by the methy neighbors. For a while, we applied for government assistance for health insurance, but then putting enough food on the table became a stretch. I also remember going with my mom to the grocery store, where she would write checks that she wasn't sure would go through so she could get some cash to pay for little things we needed, and give us a few bucks each to take to school. Christmas was a similar yet more intense runaround, as she went to check-cashing places and jumped through all sorts of hoops trying to figure out how she was going to buy presents for my little brother and sister. Now that I'm a mom myself, I appreciate how hard she struggled to provide for us even more. My high school was full of rich kids, the kind who got new cars for their 16th birthdays and carried Louis Vuitton Speedy bags to biology class. These weren't kids I was close with, but most of my friends were still middle class. They lived in nice houses and their parents bought nice things for them. Whenever they wanted to do stuff, like go to the mall or watch a friend's band play at a local coffee shop, I had to get really creative to cover up the fact that I didn't have money to go with them. All those acting skills came in handy. When I was a sophomore, I got asked to go to the senior prom, which seemed like a total coup, until I realized there was no way I could pull it off. I didn't even own any makeup, much less a fancy dress. When I confided this to my best friend Madison, she took me to the Clinique counter at the mall and used her own money to buy me eyeshadow, foundation, and lipstick. My mom's cousin stepped in to buy me a dress. I was a total prom charity case. The dress I picked out could best be described as Latina Barbie. It was black satin with spaghetti straps and hot pink edged ruffles down the front. My mom took me to Santee Alley, LA's wholesale fashion district, and we bought one of those little jewelry packs that had pink teardrop earrings and a matching necklace. I even wore a flower in my hair, señorita style. In spite of the group effort, the prom was, as almost all proms are, a total disappointment. My date didn't buy me a corsage, his mom ended up running and buying me one at the last minute, and at the dance we barely talked. At the end of the night, he made a half-hearted attempt to sleep with me, which I rebuffed wholeheartedly. The before and after pictures were basically like this. Before: me smiling and posing, hair piled high on top of my head. After: me scowling and pissed off, with a dew no amount of hairspray or bobby pins could hold in place. As Dad's stint of unemployment dragged on, I became the only one in the family who had any money. The California Child Actors Bill requires that 15% of a child actor's earnings be automatically set aside in a trust, which is often called a Coogan account, named after Jackie Coogan, a child actor in the 1920s who earned millions of dollars only to turn 18 and discover that his parents had spent it all. Whoops. I didn't have millions, more like tens of thousands in my Coogan account, but these were dire times. There was literally no money coming in at all. So over the next few years, my mom and I made 2 court visits to request a withdrawal from my account. I'd miss the first few hours of class, and we'd go to court and stand in front of a judge to petition for permission. "Your Honor," my mom would say, "this is my daughter, and she has X amount of money in an account that I protect. But recently our family has fallen on hard times. We would like to withdraw $2,000 from the account to cover us for the next month. My husband is currently looking for work, and I have 2 other children to take care of." The judge would listen and then ask me if I was okay with the idea. I always said yes. Because I'd been a working actor, I was also eligible to receive unemployment, even though I was still a minor. This brought in another $700 every 2 weeks in checks made out to me that my parents cashed. So for about 3 years, from the time I was 15 until I was a senior in high school, I was almost always financially helping my family in some way. I don't think it's right to take money from your kids, and I don't think my parents thought it was right either. I just think they didn't have any other choice. I wasn't bitter about it at all. Because I'd started working so young, I'd always been mature for my age and had a pretty adult relationship with my parents. But still, we weren't exactly a family that talked things out or excelled at communication, and they never asked how I felt about contributing to the household financially. This was at the height of my eating disorder, and somehow they didn't connect the dots and see my anorexia for what it really was: a control freak reaction to being under a lot of pressure. As I've mentioned, my auditions had pretty much dried up by this point in my life, which was a major blow to my self-esteem and sense of self-worth. The added financial stress on my family made me feel even more helpless about everything. Then I felt like it wasn't just my career riding on every audition, but potentially the roof over my family's head. And walking in to sing and dance and light up a room while carrying that emotional baggage? Well, hell, it's no wonder I didn't book anything. When I turned 16, I was allowed to take some money out of the account to buy something for myself: a mother effin' car. Blood, sweat, and tears went into the rounds of negotiation with my parents, and when they finally agreed, you would have thought I'd won the lottery. I set about looking for my dream car, and I found it: a Jeep Wrangler for sale in Huntington Beach for $4,200. On the day I went to sign the papers, the whole family came along to cheer me on. The car was a full-on, grown-up version of the Barbie Jeep, no doubt a latent wish hanging around from those days when I got to drive the battery-powered Jeep on Family Matters. It was white with 2 pink stripes down the side, a removable top, leopard print seat covers, a steering wheel the size of my face, fuzzy leopard print dice hanging from the rearview mirror, and a pink Barbie sticker on the back. It was also 20 years old and a bona fide lemon. The Jeep had no air conditioning, which I figured was no big deal because I could always just take the top off and cruise around with the wind in my hair. But it was an extraordinarily hot day in June when I went to buy it, and I could already feel the sweat start to pool under my armpits before I'd even pulled out of the lot. I did not care one bit, though. I was on top of the world, riding high on a wave of newly found independence. My family waved to me as I drove off, and as I saw them getting smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, I was like, I am free! I am finally free! Then my new car started to break down on the freeway. It slowed and sputtered, and all of a sudden there was no acceleration. I put the blinkers on and coasted to the shoulder on the right. Then I called my dad to come and get me. Fortunately, I'd only managed to get a few miles, so the family was not too far behind me. Mere minutes after I'd celebrated my independence by leaving them in the dust, there they were, all four of them in the Mazda, hazard lights blinking and horn honking, pulling up behind me on the shoulder while my little brother and sister waved from the back seat and my mom hung out the window of the passenger side yelling, "Naya, what happened to your new car?" There was a feeling of wind in my hair, all right, from all the other cars zooming past as Dad and I sweated through our shirts, trying to figure out what was wrong. Turns out the car was out of gas because the gauge was broken. Dad waited with me while my mom drove to the nearest gas station and returned with just enough gas to get me home. Once we got home, we called the dealership. They were super apologetic and told us they'd be happy to fix the gas gauge. All it would take was another $2,000. That was $2,000 we definitely did not have. And there was no way we were going back to court to attempt another withdrawal. The tears started to well up in my eyes, the smell of exhaust still in my hair from an hour of standing on the side of the freeway. This day was not turning out quite like I'd imagined. Dad, sensing I was on the verge of a meltdown, jumped up, ran into the kitchen, and returned with a piece of paper and a pencil. "Okay, Naya," he said, "here's what you're going to do. Every time you go to the gas station, you get a receipt. You figure out how many gallons you put in, and you note your miles from your odometer. Then you divide." I swallowed my tears and nodded. I hated math, but I also really, really wanted to have my own car. From that day on, I was more on top of my mileage than my schoolwork. I added and subtracted every damn day, but still broke down 7 times in that car. Once when it was 110 degrees in the middle of the summer. I stowed a gas can behind the back seat and made a mental map of the nearest filling stations and the quickest, most discreet routes to get there. I drove that POS Jeep for 2 years, and then, wouldn't you know, Jack of all trades George Rivera sold it at an auto fair for $3,500. We never fixed a thing. Cold calling my way straight to hell. I'd imagined that life with a car would mean nonstop cruising to the mall to fill up the back seat with shopping bags or cute boys piling in so we could all drive down to the beach for bonfires and sunset makeout sessions. "Oh, you guys go on without me," I imagined some dreamy blonde surfer saying to his friends. "I'm going to chill with Naya and get a ride." Double entendre totally intended in that Jeep. Alas, that was not the case, and my new wheels were mainly used for chauffeuring my siblings around town and picking them up after school, especially once my mom, who'd always stayed home, started to look for work. Finally, she called me into her room one night when I was 17. "I'm divorcing your dad," she said as she sat on the bed. "It's just something I have to do." Rather than crying upon hearing this news, I was happy, for my mom and for my dad, but especially for my brother and sister, who still had to contend with several more years of living at home. This felt like the first step in all of us getting on with our lives. My sister was still in elementary school, so she stayed with my mom, but my brother and I went to live with my dad. My dad had a few pieces of advice he liked to dole out. 1. He called boyfriends and girlfriends dream killers, cautioning us about throwing away our dreams for another person. He was also big on doing what you love for a career. All his children followed this advice, and he took credit scores very, very seriously. "Don't mess up your credit," was practically his mantra. With every financial decision he made, Dad always meant well and tried to do the right thing for his family. For some reason, stuff just never worked out for him. But he practices what he preaches. Even though he's been bankrupt twice, he still has really good credit. As my 18th birthday was approaching, Dad took me to the bank and set me up with a checking account and debit card in anticipation of my getting total access to my Coogan account. As soon as the clock hit midnight on January 12th, 2003, my bank account went from $0 to $42,000. Now, mind you, $42K is not a fortune, but at that time, it was more money than I could even comprehend. My only previous income came from a part-time job at Abercrombie & Fitch, where I made, at most, $100 every 2 weeks. The possibilities seemed endless, and Dad tried to steer me in the right direction. He taught me how to balance my checkbook and told me how I could start building up that all-important good credit score by getting a low-limit credit card, using it for a few small purchases, and paying it off every month. I figured I was set. I really only had a few things I wanted to buy. $42,000 couldn't go that fast, right? The first thing I bought was the aforementioned boob job. $8,000 well spent. Then I wanted a car. I'd talked a lot of shit to the other kids at school, the kind who were gifted Beamers at their Sweet 16s, about how I was going to get all this money. "I'm about to come into some wealth," I'd say, and dream about how I was going to crush them with a brand new, to me, Land Rover Discovery. I have no idea why I picked a total mom-mobile as my dream car, but I could not be swayed. Even when the dealership told me my lack of credit history meant I'd have to plunk down a $12K down payment. I didn't care, though. It was worth it to feel the possibly imagined looks of envy as I cruised into that school parking lot on the first day. The car should have had a vanity plate that read Coogan 1. So with those 2 bulk items checked off my list, I still had quite a bit of spending money left over. I took Dad's advice and got a few credit cards and started to treat myself to a few little visits to Kitson.com. And by a few, I mean daily. Velour juicy suit? Add to cart. Von Dutch trucker hat like I'd seen Paris Hilton wearing in Us Weekly? Go ahead and throw that in there too. But I was still super on top of my spending, and each month I would do exactly as Dad had taught me and pay everything off. I was also a freak about balancing my checkbook, writing checks for everything and tracking the amounts in the little ledger that came with it. Minus $15.07 at Ralph's, I'd write down, as Madison would roll her eyes and call me an old lady under her breath. But I loved my checkbook. I wish we still used them, and besides, managing money was fun for me and made me feel like a grown-up. Those grown-up feelings intensified when Madison and I traded in the t-shirt folding shifts at Abercrombie for a job where we could make some real money, telemarketing. At the time, Madison had this friend, Christy. She later turned out to be a total meth head, who was always very speedily and enthusiastically talking about how she was making a ton of money telemarketing and didn't even have to work that hard. That was all we needed to hear to think that this was indeed a great idea. Soon, Madison and I were sitting in a windowless room manning the phones every day after school. The place we were working was a golf course and RV park that was supposed to be built a few hours away from where we lived. It was touted as an exclusive, all-inclusive retreat where people would come to vacation, play a few holes, and kick back with their families. Our job was to cold call people and convince them to come to an information session, where the sales staff would use the hard sell to pressure them to sign up for a timeshare membership. You got $50 for every person you recruited to attend a meeting, and $100 if the dumbass, poor chap, actually bought a timeshare. As clean-cut teenage girls, Madison and I were definitely the outcasts among our ragtag group of coworkers, but we took it just as seriously as everyone else. There was Norma, who chain-smoked and would encourage herself before making calls by growling, "I need my money." There was a black kid who would pretend to be Michael Jordan and sell people on the place's promised exclusivity. Madison played dumb and acted like a super dippy cheerleader who thought that everything anyone ever said was about the most impressive thing she'd ever heard. "No way!" you could often hear her exclaiming into her headset to some old dude who probably thought she sounded hot. I was super slick and spoke to everyone like we were just two business-minded professionals talking shop. From one hard-working person to another, I knew they would want to take advantage of such a great offer and put some of their hard-earned money to use. Dan? Dan, hi. This is Naya from Lake Serenity Golf and Ranch Club. How are you? This isn't a good time. I'm actually having dinner with my family. Delicious. Is there a better time I can call you tomorrow? I wrote down all my calls in my calendar and always followed up exactly when I said I would. Great. 2 p.m. it is. And the following day, right on schedule. Hi, Dan. It's Naya from Lake Serenity Golf and Ranch Club. We spoke yesterday when you were having dinner with your lovely family. Madison and I were so good that we both got promoted. Now we weren't just on the phones, but actually doing in-person sales pitches at the infamous information sessions. When one of the owners discovered I was good at public speaking, I got promoted even further. Now I delivered the sales presentation. That meant I got a commission for every audience member who'd seen me work my PowerPoint magic and decided to sign up. I'd stand up on stage in my best business casual attire, little button-up shirts, white jeans, and my kitten heels. With a pointer in hand, I'd click through the slides in my presentation, pointing out where the pool was going to be, the solar panels for green energy, and the view from the 18th hole. Hey golfers, I'd say. I have a question for you. How much is one round of golf where you play? Then I'd break down the financials of our birdie package. When I'd exhausted that tactic, I'd go in for the emotional kill, pulling up some stock photos of kids and saying, just think of all the Kodak moments you and your family will have when you're here. Kodak moment was my signature phrase, and I wore it out. Over the phone, you could really believe that the person you were talking to was a sharp businessman who recognized a good deal when he saw it. In person, it was harder to deceive yourself. These potential customers were usually people with 3 teeth in their mouth and a credit card, desperately looking to buy into a dream. We were there to sell it to them and take all their money in the process. But still, I was 18 and making $1,500 a weekend. Also, I was totally a believer. I assumed that everything I talked about would happen, that every rendering I showed on stage would someday be built to those exact specifications, probably even more grand. That pile of dirt there? In my mind, I could already see the bubbling fountain that would someday be in that spot. And there were golf carts. Surely that meant a full course was not too far off. Wrong. The whole place went bankrupt before a shovel even hit the ground, and Madison and I had to find new jobs. Abercrombie? Here I come. Again. Wait, so rent is something you have to pay every month? I paid off the Land Rover, got the good stamp on my credit, just like Dad had said, and swapped it for a little Mercedes compressor. Up until this point, I'd been doing everything right. I still paid off my credit cards every month, and with what was left from my Coogan account and the golf course job, I was the very picture of fiscal responsibility. When I first turned 18, I thought the money would be my ticket to doing whatever I wanted, including ditching my parents and moving out on my own. Instead, I kept living with my dad until I was 20, and my brother, who was still in high school, was living there as well. Michael is not a small person. Also, my dad had decided that since I was technically an adult and had a job, I should start paying rent. I didn't exactly agree with him on this point, and thought that if I was going to pay rent to live in a bedroom at my dad's house, then I might as well get my own place. I didn't go far. Valencia is crawling with big apartment complexes, so I literally just looked down the street from where I was living with my dad and said, "There, I'll move there." I still love apartments, especially in those big complexes where they all look the same. I find it comforting. I couldn't wait to move in, even though I had no idea how much living on my own would cost. Even though I was now a manager at Abercrombie, I was still making only about $3,000 a month before taxes. I signed the lease and used some of my lump sum savings to pay the first, last, and security deposit on a one-bedroom with a tiny balcony. It was super cute. In fact, $1,300 a month in rent cute. Then I had to furnish it. Aside from my dresser and bed from my dad's house, I didn't own so much as a spoon. I had to buy everything: towels, dishes, trash cans, a toilet brush. I also bought a lot of things that couldn't exactly be called necessities, like a Hello Kitty toaster that burned a cat face into each slice of bread, and a giant flat-screen TV to mount on the wall in the living room. I put all this on my credit cards, fully intending to pay them off, but then discovered that my rent and car payment alone pretty much cashed out my take-home pay each month. Then there were utilities on top of that. I kept paying the electric bill, so at least I could still watch the big screen TV that I couldn't technically afford, but I wasn't making a dent in the credit card bill, and it was rising by the month. When the bills came in the mail, I didn't throw them away. That would have made me feel too guilty, but stuffed them unopened in a drawer, telling myself that I was going to get to them someday. After a few months of living on my own, I was really popular with the credit agencies. All kinds of credit agencies, all over the country. They'd call, I'd answer, and then save that number in my contacts as do not answer, so I would never mistakenly talk to them again. If anyone had looked in my phone, they would have seen my sheaf of do not answers and thought I was up to something seriously sketchy, even though I wasn't. At least not yet. I lived in that apartment for half a year, and when it was finally just about fully furnished, I had to face the fact that I just couldn't live there anymore. I'd signed a year-long lease, so I had to pay an early termination fee, not to mention losing my deposit and paying damages for drilling holes in the living room wall to hang that big-ass TV. When the management company presented me with the final tally of how much it was going to cost me to move out of their building, I practically laughed in their face. It was money I didn't have, so chalk that up to yet another black mark on my credit report. For my grand move-out, I begged Madison to help me and scraped together enough money to rent a U-Haul. Not an actual truck, mind you, but a flatbed trailer that lets you cruise down the street with all your shit on display in the open air. We hooked it up to the back of her SUV, loaded up all the stuff, and drove right back to the same apartment I'd moved out of just 6 months before. My dad was coming out the door as we turned the corner down his street. Madison started honking the horn and waving out the window as soon as she saw him. "Hey, Dad," I yelled as we pulled into the driveway. "You got room for all this stuff? Yeah, don't worry, we'll make it work." One reason why I was never too worried about the bills piling up was that I was always hoping an acting job was right around the corner. All it would take was one role and one check to pay everything off. This was true in theory, but in reality I was working so much at Abercrombie that I didn't have time for auditions. That impediment soon took care of itself. I got fired, and then I had plenty of time for auditions. But my already small monthly income shrunk down to a big fat zero. My financial lifelines were unemployment checks and the occasional residual. The Fresh Prince and Family Matters were both in reruns at the time, so occasionally I'd get a check when one of my episodes would air. It'd be like $6. But I'd head straight to the bank to cash it because, hell, $6 meant lunch. Some days I wouldn't even leave the house unless one of those checks came. The mailbox and I were best friends. I even requested my own key. "Dad, I've got stuff in there too," I protested when he seemed ready to resist. "And the bank closes before you get home from work." Soon, I got more mail, a letter from the bank stating that my car was going to be repossessed. I'd completely stopped making payments on it, so this wasn't exactly a surprise. I asked my dad for advice. "Okay, here's what you're going to do," he said, and instructed me to clean out all my personal belongings and make sure I always left it where it could easily be found. Clearly, this was not his first repossession rodeo, which makes me think that he hadn't really turned in the Lexus a few years before. Now every time I went outside to check the mailbox, I'd also check the curb to see if my car was still parked there, basically like a crackhead making sure no one had stolen my stuff. Sure enough, one day, it was just gone. I texted Madison like, "Shit, can I get a ride?" No car, no job was not my financial rock bottom, nor was it the unpaid parking tickets and resulting unpaid court fees that were also piling up. It hit a few weeks later and completely by accident. I had deposited a $12 check at the ATM and without thinking, asked to withdraw $20. Lo and behold, it gave it to me, and a light bulb went off. I give machine envelope. Machine gives me money. Soon I was depositing empty envelopes and taking out cash whenever I desperately needed money. Newsflash, banks catch on to that stuff, and fast. I tried to play dumb when they called and claimed I had no idea why so many of my deposit envelopes were coming back empty, but they didn't buy it for a minute. So soon, not only were my credit cards maxed out and my phone constantly buzzing with do not answer numbers, but I couldn't even deposit my measly residual checks anywhere because the bank had closed my account. Seriously though, I'm lucky that all I got was a shaming and a few more levels of inconvenience. What I was doing counts as fraud, and I could have gone to jail. There are characters on Orange is the New Black who were locked up for less than what I was doing. Finally, after a brief stint waitressing where I seemed to spend more money going out with my coworkers than I made, I realized I had to get serious about my finances. The first step in that process was facing up to the fact that the big acting paycheck I'd been dreaming about forever might really never come in. I went back to working retail and used the little money I had coming in to pay my dad the rent that he still insisted on charging me. I also started to try to pay down some of my debt. Try being the key word here, because I was barely making a dent in the interest. I also cut my expenses wherever I could. I completely stopped spending money on anything that wasn't totally a necessity. I dug through my closets for old clothes that I hadn't worn in forever and got creative with the styling to make them seem like new outfits. When I absolutely had to buy something new, I bought it on sale at the store where I worked so I could maximize my employee discount. When I went to my shifts at the mall, I'd take snacks or pack a lunch, so I wasn't dropping an hour's worth of pay on some shitty pizza and iceberg lettuce salad from a fast food restaurant. When the do not answer numbers called, I actually answered and would talk to them about how much I owed where and what I could do to start paying it off. I always hoped that they'd give me a break because at least I wasn't avoiding them anymore, but no such luck. I limited myself to one night out a month with friends and came to terms with the fact that my new social life mainly involved going over to my mom's apartment to sit on her couch and watch her watch Tyler Perry movies. It wasn't fun, but at least it was responsible. I was no longer afraid that the bank was watching my every move, nor did I feel like a tweaker train wreck, one residual check away from living on the streets. When I finally booked Glee, I didn't celebrate with a vacation, a new bag, or a new ride. Instead, I hired an agency to help clean up my credit. The hard truth about these kinds of agencies is that they really don't do anything you can't do for yourself. The ones you hear advertised on the radio that promise to get negative things removed from your credit report are a scam. If you get your car repossessed like I did, well, sorry girl, that's just not going away. What they can do is make a whole bunch of calls for you, figure out how much you need to pay to whom and when, and basically act as the intermediary between you and all the people you need to pay off. With my new gig on Glee, I had the money to pay off my bills, but the filming schedule was so hectic that I didn't have time to keep track of the bureaucratic side of it, so a credit agency made a lot of sense for me, and I used them for 5 years. That was how long it took. And even after I'd paid off all my debt, my credit was still sucky enough that I couldn't get a lease and had to put down a huge cash deposit when I wanted to get a new car. Even after I booked Glee, I was still cautious about spending money or getting in over my head with any kind of purchase, so I kept living with my dad. Finally, one night I was rehearsing a dance routine for I Say a Little Prayer until almost 2 a.m. and trying to be as quiet as I could since my dad was asleep upstairs and had to get up early for work. But I kept messing up because I had the music so low that I couldn't hear the beat. I knew I needed to move out, but there was no way I was making the same mistakes again. I convinced a high school friend to move in with me, and we got an 800-square-foot studio apartment on Vineland and Ventura. It was $1,000 a month, so we split the rent and each paid $500. We had 2 twin beds, like a dorm room, which would have been disastrous if I'd ever tried to bring home guys. But at this point, dating was the furthest thing from my mind. I'd work, shower, sleep, work, shower, sleep. And whenever I got a free moment, I'd call the credit agency to see who I needed to write a check to that week. People get funny about money. To this day, my mom blames my dad for me squandering all my money, and I'm still trying to reassure her by inviting her over to my house, showing her the pool, and reminding her that I'll be okay. I don't blame either of my parents for the mess I got myself into. My mom came over while I was writing this and was shocked and horrified to learn that I'd put empty deposit envelopes in the ATM machine. She certainly did not raise her daughter to do that. You have to make your own mistakes, and that's especially true with money. I'd like to think that the fact I blew through $42,000 when I was still a teenager was insurance against going all MC Hammer with my money when I got older. It's good to get your mistakes out of the way early, as long as you learn from them. I've always believed in enjoying today rather than squirreling all your money away for the future. If you really want that bag, then buy it because you never know. But now I take the time to make sure I really want it and that it's not just an impulse buy. If I get sucked into looking at new houses on the internet, I step back, remind myself that we don't need to move, and try to be content with just rearranging the dining room. Cost effective, and way easier on my marriage. My mom has always said, people get funny about money, and she should know. I was a first-hand witness to the toll financial strain took on my parents' marriage. For this reason, I both hate talking about money and know it's something that has to be done. My husband Ryan and I each have our own bank accounts, which we use for personal and fun purchases, and a joint one that we use for bills and everything related to the house. That way, if I go shopping, he knows that I'm not using his money to rip and run through Barney's. After growing up with a stay-at-home mom, I knew I wanted to be an equal financial partner in my relationships. It's a point of pride for me to be making as much, if not more, than my man, but I found myself questioning this resolve when Glee ended. I was already into my second trimester and entering that phase of pregnancy where you can barely keep your eyes open at 5 p.m. I couldn't imagine rallying the energy to audition and take on a new role. Also, I'd spent the last 6 years working my ass off. I wanted to enjoy being pregnant, get everything ready for the baby, and have the luxury of naps. Ryan was totally supportive of this, as he damn well should have been, let's be honest, and even helped me draw up a post-baby timeline to figure out when I realistically wanted to get back to work. In most relationships, the money will ebb and flow, but the important thing is that you're both on the same page about it and have realistic expectations for yourself and your partner. I've also learned that while you should definitely talk money with your partner, that's about the only person you should be talking about it with. Social media makes it especially easy to flaunt what you've got, but take a step back. Do you really want people to know what you've got? No. That's why I'll always keep my bank balance close to my chest, but I will flaunt the hell out of my good credit score. Now that's something to be proud of. Sorry. 2 words. Credit cards. 2 more words. Bank fraud. They can't come after me for this now, can they? Spending so much time thinking about what I didn't have and placing so much importance on material things. Buying cars I couldn't afford. F the Mercedes. I should have gotten a Honda. Wall mounting a TV in a rental. Not sorry. That I didn't grow up rich. Having to work for what I want means I appreciate it that much more. Supporting my family. They mean the world to me, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Getting my financial disasters out of the way early, before I was married or had a family, so the only credit score I wrecked was my own. Facing the facts and doing little things to save money and cut spending, as opposed to just waiting for a windfall. Treating myself to luxuries and splurges when I know I can afford it. About my current credit score, it's really good, and damn did I work for it.